Before we get started with all the topics, and there's a lot of interesting things with you. You have been a Bitcoin OG for a long time, and I think we can learn a lot from you. But before we get started with all the topics, maybe give the viewers and the listeners some overview of who you are, and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was for a long time. I'm an engineer by training, and I was for a long time an engineer working on payment systems for more than 20 years. And I also studied business at Columbia Business School in New York in the 90s. So in the 90s, I developed both my professional expertise, but also I was exposed to the workings of Wall Street and of the financial system, and I started immediately having doubts about the number of intermediaries and, more importantly, the amount of money, the capture of money they were capable of exerting on the system. So I felt this system was really suboptimal, and so that's how I got interested in the people that were trying to find alternative solutions, and that's exactly how I got involved in Bitcoin very early on, because I had the opportunity to read the white paper, and evidently it checked all the boxes of the system that many people like myself were hoping for. We were then back at the end of 2008. But I didn't think immediately that this would be what it is today. I just thought it's outstanding work, intellectual work. It's an amazing invention, but I had no idea that this would become a working network. However, in 2011 and 2010 it started, and 2011 it became obvious that Bitcoin was working, and it was going to be a huge thing, because adoption really started then. And the reason that it started is because we were starting to see exchange platforms. Exchange platforms played a crucial role because it enabled the people to have a price for Bitcoin, so it enabled them to buy a Bitcoin and sell them. Again, in 2011, it became obvious it was going to be a success. So I dropped my job and decided to go full time on Bitcoin. And I was wondering what could I do in the Bitcoin ecosystem in 2011, and it was all about exchange, because the exchanges then were very starting startups, fragile ventures, and MT Gox showed how fragile they were. So we felt, with my associate, there was an opportunity to develop an exchange. So we did, and we started Paymium, the company I'm the president of today. And Paymium is an exchange, Bitcoin Euro exchange, where you can buy and sell Bitcoins. And we've been in business for 15 years now.
That's amazing. For like 2011, seeing Bitcoin and seeing like what's the projected thing for you, and not only going to buy it, because like a lot of people saw it and didn't buy it the first time around. And I myself needed like about 3 to 4 years from first time hearing about it till I actually bought it. It was way later, like 2017 and 2020. But seeing it and then not only buying it, but actually also saying like, hey, I quit my job and just want to build into this thing. This is really impressive, because like it needs a lot of conviction. And 2011, in my eyes, there were a lot of open questions still with Bitcoin, and you probably also like what made you so intrigued in this whole thing, where like, let's dump money and my time into this thing.
You mean what made me decide to go full time on Bitcoin?
Yes, and especially like 2011 was very different. I think people that are listening to now, and they might see all the podcasts and all the things that are going on. It's a very different place. 2011, there were no content creators or anything like that. It was very hard to do anything in Bitcoin.
That's right. However, there was a platform that played a crucial role beyond the mailing list, because, as you know, mailing lists were really for specialists and professionals like I was. But the game changer was Bitcoin Talk, I believe, because Bitcoin Talk was very active then, starting 2010. And all the questions that you hear today that people have, and they are legit questions, the questions that naturally come to mind when you start learning about Bitcoin, they were already asked in 2011. And what amazes me is that the answers you can find still today on Bitcoin Talk about these questions are still valid pretty much today, because nothing's changed in Bitcoin. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's been here for 15 years, and it hasn't changed. Fundamentally, it's the same protocol. So all the answers that were given back then by very smart people like I can't name them, because there are so many very smart people back then that were active on Bitcoin Talk, like Gavin Andresen, Satoshi, even though he left early on. Sergio Lerner, people, lots of very smart people, and they had the good answers, precise and good answers. So that every month, every week that went by, you grew more convinced about Bitcoin, in fact, because every time you had a question, you found a very valid answer to your doubts, to your objection. And that's still the situation today. But as you point out, there are many more talking heads today. And congrats, by the way, for what you're doing, because you are doing a very good job. But unfortunately, not everybody is doing a good job. And it's important that you have podcasts like your podcast, because it's quality content and there is a lot of junk. And that's perhaps the major difference between now and 2011. 2011, basically, you had Bitcoin Talk, and that was it. And now you have many options to choose from.
Yeah, also exchanges and the ecosystem in general probably got better, and that there was no Lightning network. So there's a lot of things.
Oh yeah,
as you say,
From the technologies, progresses have been impressive. Yes, absolutely.
But it's really impressive that Bitcoin hasn't changed. It's just the ecosystem around it, like the Lightning Network. We have the exchanges, we have the content creators, we have all the people around
RGB,
Bitcoin.
things
It's fascinating. And now I think you wrote also a book, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I wrote a couple of books. In fact, I wrote the first book that was called simply a Bitcoin book. Because the title was available, I felt it was natural. But I wrote it in French because that's my native language. And I started looking for a publisher, and the publishers simply didn't get it. I found that the publishing industry was even more backwards and obsolete than the banking industry. So these people have no idea, how to handle innovative content. So they didn't know what I was writing about. So the book, I ended up self-publishing the book. So I didn't have as many readers as I could have, and as a result, there are fewer millionaires, because people who wrote the book, Bitcoin book, in 2011 or 2012 had a chance to make a fortune if they wanted to, if they got it. So. But that's part of the problem we had in the early days, is because there were so many resistance, ignorance, and as a result, people that could have been exposed to Bitcoin simply didn't have the information, and there weren't enough voices. I think Max Kaiser in the US is probably the most visible person that really got the word out about Bitcoin. In Europe, we had a political party called the Pirate Party, Pirate Partei in Northern Europe, with someone called Rick van Vinger, also made some good progress in terms of exposing Bitcoin to the general public. But this was difficult. So yes, I wrote this book, but today I'm here to talk about the last one, and that's energy, the flip side of money. So it's about energy.
That's super interesting, but it's fascinating for me, like seeing Bitcoin in 2011 and like writing a book about it and all those things. Like that's super impressive. Do you had like an initial thesis on Bitcoin, where Bitcoin can go and how Bitcoin can develop in the coming years? And from 2011, we have now 14 years basically. Like this is already a kind of long history that we have since 2011. And how has this initial thesis of Bitcoin kind of held up towards what Bitcoin is now?
Yeah, I wrote an article in 2011 that I finally got published in early 2012. So it took me 6 months to get a review, uh, a newsletter to publish the article. And finally, they published it in early 2012. And I predicted that Bitcoin would be worth one day 600 euros. Because I felt it could take a small fraction of what gold was as a store of value. It would compete against gold, and a very conservative estimate back then led me to believe it would hit 600 euros in a few years, in say 3 to 4 years. So that's what I wrote in 2012, and as you know, Bitcoin has gone way beyond that since then. But yes, that was my thesis. Is because I knew, as a payment professional, I knew money and the payment systems are two sides of the same thing. You don't have money if you don't have a payment system to make it transferable to between users. So Bitcoin was a payment systems and a new form of money, but as a form of money, it was more comparable to gold. And as a result, I felt it would take a share of the pie that gold was dominating. That is a store of value hedged against inflation.
Interesting. And I mean, 600 euros, it seems so like, in hindsight, it seems so bearish. It seems so like, oh, 600 euros like that. Like we cracked it really quickly. But at the time, probably this was like outrageously bullish. I was like, oh, 600 euros, that's a lot of money. The same as people look at probably now when people say, oh, it will go to 1 million or 10 million or anything like that. Is your thesis now changed where you think that Bitcoin might outgrow gold, and how you look at like the next 15 years kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm convinced that Bitcoin will go bigger than gold now. At the time, I thought it was going to be a fraction of what Bitcoin was. Now I think it's the reverse will happen. Gold will become a fraction of what Bitcoin is going to be, because it's just a superior form of store of value. And that's because I understand, and I share this understanding with my readers, that as a store of value, it's also a store of energy, so to speak, store of past energy. With gold, it's a physical proof that energy was expended to create the coin. And with Bitcoin, it's a mathematical proof. But in essence, it's a proof of what? It's a proof of energy in both cases. But the fact that Bitcoin is a mathematical proof, it's just much simpler to handle on networks like in the internet, obviously. And gold is just obsolete as a form of proof because it's just much harder to use as a proof. So that's why I think now that Bitcoin is going to be bigger than gold, probably 10 times bigger than gold. And the metrics of many people that are professional economists have predicted that it could go effectively to, for instance, Michael Saylor is predicting Bitcoin at 20 million a piece in 20 years, which is now sounds like almost a reasonable assumption. And if that's the case, it means Bitcoin is going to be effectively bigger than gold.
It's crazy to think about where Bitcoin is coming from and where it's kind of going. And you wrote the book, as you said, the energy, the flip side of money. Why focus on energy? Like, what's the fundamental thing about energy, and then it's like the money is kind of the side effect here.
Well, in fact, as well, I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, like you did, like many of us did. I found energy, but I found a corridor leading to energy. But in fact, the corridor leading to energy is in fact leading to a much bigger rabbit hole, and that's the rabbit hole of energy. In fact, Bitcoin is a subset of the energy rabbit hole. That's what I found, and I think it's an important enough finding that I had to share it with as many people as possible, because it's absolutely, it's almost a life-changing experience to discover that energy is in fact everywhere, and not only is it everywhere, it's inside us, and we are made of energy, and that's a very very important discovery in in learning about yourself. That's the life path that we are traveling. You discover that energy is everywhere, and it's probably the uniting force and the substance of the universe, of which we are part of. So that's why I wrote about energy, and writing about energy obviously helps help me understand and teach about Bitcoin, because it explains why Bitcoin is using energy, in fact.
And is it's interesting because if you look at energy that is kind of ruling everything, then it's like Bitcoin is the best measuring stick for energy. Like Bitcoin is the best representation or unit of energy. Is that kind of the thesis you're going with?
Yes, in fact, what I discovered in studying this subject is that the value of money comes from as two components, if you will. One component is the energy value of money, and the other component is the social value. The energy value is, for instance, for Bitcoin, the electricity that was spent to produce the coin, and for gold, the same thing. For the euro, the dollar, the energy comes from someone that has borrowed money. That's credit-based money. So there is a borrower that has promised to work to repay the loan, and that's where the energy comes from in the case of the euro or the dollar. So that's for the energy value, and the social value is linked to the acceptance network, if you will, of the money. If it has a huge acceptance network, like the euro or the dollar, a good chunk of the value comes from that. For Bitcoins, the same thing. Ethereum, for instance, it is proof of stake, has zero energy value because it's proof of stake, but it has social value because there is a strong ecosystem around Ethereum. And so all the value of Ethereum as money today is social value, zero energy value. In the case of Bitcoin, you do have these two components, energy and social value.
Interesting, because then you have in Bitcoin not only the social value of the money side and also the energy one. It's interesting. I've never thought about having something in two sides, like the energy side and then also the social side. It's an interesting concept. And then it's like when people say, oh, like Bitcoin only has value because other people buy it, and there's always some truth to it because that's the social layer of it.
Exactly.
But it's actually only true for things like Ethereum because that's just the social value, and there's no energy value in it. And then the gold aspect is also like there's an energy value and a social. That's really interesting because then you can argue in a very easy to understand way of why things have value, and there's like more to it than just the energy value and the utility value. Because if I mine a Bitcoin today and sell that very Bitcoin in 20 years, I get a lot more than just the energy value that I put in today. If I sell it today, I only get a little bit more probably, like the mining industry is then I actually mine it for, depending on like my energy bill and all those things. That's an interesting aspect, that it has the energy component, but also the social component. But I guess the social component is the really important one, because if no one wants to buy it, then it's still the hard one.
Exactly. And the social value is tied to the concept of entropy, which is very close to the concept of energy. Entropy is what you, in physics, is what you'd call hidden information. So you are reducing entropy by finding hidden information. It's kind of abstract, but it's at the heart of the concept of data and information, which is crucial. It's crucial to understand it in a digital world, the world in which we live today. And that's why I spent some time in the book explaining or talking about energy and entropy. But I must admit that entropy is very abstract, and many people have difficulty with abstraction and find it difficult to understand what entropy is about. But think of entropy as a way of simplifying the world, if you will. The more you reduce entropy, the more order there is, the less chaos there is. And a money system, if it has a social value, reduces the entropy of society because it puts value on things through the formation of prices, and it facilitates trades also. So that's how a monetary system reduces the entropy. It's an entropy reducing system, in fact, for society. So that's explained in the book, but I must admit it's kind of abstract, and that's why you have to read the book. I think a podcast might not be enough to grasp what the concept of entropy is. Because it's also a concept that has emerged fairly recently, say since the 19th century, relatively recent for the history of science. But again, some people are still struggling with the concept of entropy. And the concept of energy, which seems simpler, also has evolved since the 19th century. And now it's, as I said, it could be considered as uniting all the forces of the universe, which was not the case in the 19th century. Energy was thought about just as heat and forces, but not to the extent where it is today recognized as a universal force.
Do you also then think that everything will be eventually just be measured into Bitcoin? If energy is the universal force, and then Bitcoin is the best thing that we can measure energy in?
As money, yeah, I think it's a superior form of money to put prices on things, including prices of energy, because effectively today, many people have pointed out that for instance, the oil exporting countries are exporting oil for that's limited supply in exchange for money that's printed in unlimited supply, that is the US dollar. So that's clearly like what we are using here, the social value of the dollar. Clearly, the energy value of the dollar is not sufficient to compensate for the price of oil expressed in dollar. Whereas in the case of Bitcoin, you could have a more precise measure, because the energy value of Bitcoin, as you know, is a fixed supply, so it's not distorted by excessive money creation like can be with traditional state-issued money. So in that sense, Bitcoin is superior. But Bitcoin is information. Money is a message. The transaction is a message. It's a piece of information. So it cannot be measured in joule, in a unit of energy, because it's not energy. It's entropy. It's changing the entropy of the system. It's not changing. It's not an amount of energy. So, but as a piece of information, Bitcoin is much more reliable than traditional money.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.